Hey guys, so welcome back to lesson number 2. In this lesson, we will be understanding serve-receive positions. And when I'm talking about serve-receive, that means when your opponent is serving the ball to start a point. And you are in position to receive it. In serve receive, there are 6 different positions, and each position is based off the setter, which in this case is going to be our number 1. And I'm going to have it highlighted green throughout the whole presentation, just so you folks have a visual cue for it. In serve receive, there are different rules and regulations that go into each position. One rule is about knowing if you're in the front row or the back row. This is important because when you're in a passing serve receive rotation, it matters if you are in the front or if you're in the back, because if you are in the front row, you aren't allowed to be behind a back row player, as well as if you're a back row player, you're not allowed to be in front of a front row player. In addition to knowing if you're a front or back row player for your position, you need to also know who you're in between. This helps because knowing the person to the left and the right of you will help you in knowing who you are allowed to pass or not. For example, take a look at 1, 2, and 3. Okay? Number 2 is in the middle of 3 and 1. This means that in a serve-receive passing position, number 2 is not allowed to be on the left side of position 3, or number 2 is not allowed to be on the right side of position 1. It must be in the middle. Okay, I know that was a little confusing, but don't worry, I'm going to keep going over it throughout the whole slide so you'll get used to what I'm saying. Okay, so let's go into serve-receive position 1. Again, the number 1, who is the setter, is in position right back. And this player is also in between player 6 and player 2. The setter, player 1, is also in the back row. So here is where I have identified for you the front row players who are always going to be grouped in red and the back row players who are always going to be grouped in blue. I've also laid out 2 options that your setter can have when positioning their front row players as well as their back row players. So in position 1, players 1, 2, and 3 are in the back row. Players 6, 4, and 5 are in the front row. Now remember when I said that knowing who's on the side of you or who you're in between is essential. Because in option 2, player 4, who is a front row player, is going to move back towards the back row in order to help players 3 and 2 with passing or receiving the serve. Now, with player 4, since they are a front row player, they are not allowed to be behind players 3 and 2, which is why you see the position slightly forward of players 3 and 2. Also, player 4 cannot pass on the right side of player 5, who is also in the front row. Also, looking at player 1, who is the setter, what they are going to do in this option 2 is they've pushed up position 6, okay, who is in the front row. So that allows the setter, or position 1, to be in front of position 4. So now, in both options, when player 1, who is the setter, is released to the front where they are receiving the ball, what they are doing is setting up their offense to return the ball over the net. And once the ball is returned over the net, your team goes back to base position. And this is again where you need to remember if you're a right side player, a middle, and a left side player. Okay, so let's move on to position 2. When we rotate clockwise from position 1. So now in position 2, our setter is middle back. And again, we have to remember who are our front row players and who are our back row players. Now taking a closer look at option 1 for our setter, what he or she is going to do is, since she is a back row player, she needs to push up one of the front row players in order for her to move forward players 3 and 5. So in this position, she's going to push up player 4 to the net, and that allows her to be closer to the net as well. Also, again, since she is a back row player, the two people that she cannot cross on the left or the right are players 2 and 6, because they are back row players, and that's who this player 1, is in between. Okay, and then taking a look at option 2, which is a little easier to understand. Again, players 3, 4, 5 are front row players, and then players 1, 2, and 6 are back row players. Again, in order for player 1 to be pushed or to be up on the net, they have to have a player, who in this case is player 4, in front of them, so that they're able to be in front of player 5 and 3 in serve-receive rotation 2. And again, in between player 2 and 6. So in this rotation, once the ball is served over the net, the setter receives the ball, sets the ball to their hitters, and again, once the ball goes over the net, returns to base. Now, if you looked at base from the last time and this one, now it's players 4, 5, and 3 who are in the front row, and 1, 2, and 6 who are now in the back. Now, position 3. So in this position, rotating from position 2 to position 3, our setter is in left back. That is their position. Okay? So again, what they're going to do in order to set up the offense a little better is they are going to push one of the front row players up to the net. However, again, he or she is going to be in the back row. And continuing to option 1, our front row players are 2, 3, and 4, and our back row players are 1, 6, and 5. And again, in option 1, player 4 is going to move back into the passing positions to help players 6 and 4. However, it's slightly in front of 5 and 6, sorry, not 6 and 4, 5 and 6. Because they are a front row player and they are back row players, so they can't cross each other horizontally. And then again, once the ball from our team is pushed over back to our opponent's side, we return to base. And now again, since we rotated, now players 3, 2, and 4 are in the front, and 1, 5, and 6 are in the back to base. Okay, let's continue on to position 4. And I'm going to highlight our front row and back row. Now you can see that in position 4, our setter is left front, So it makes it a little bit easier to understand the rotations now. So with being in left front, we have our players 1, 2, and 3 in the front, and 4, 5, and 6 in the back. Since our setter is in the front row, they don't need an extra player to be put towards the net in order to be allowed in the front, like they did were in positions 1, 2, and 3. In these positions, now the only thing that a setter needs to be aware of is not crossing vertically positions 2 and 3. Okay, so what that means is that our setter or player 1 cannot be on the right side of players 2 and 3. They must be on the left when we're starting. And again, once the ball is put over the net, we go back to base, and now 1, 2, and 3 are up at the net, and 4, 5, and 6 are in the back row. Moving on to position 5, now our setter, our number 1, is middle front, and players 6, 1, and 2 are in the front, and players 5, 4, and 3 are in the back. Again, the difference between options 1 and 2 are just different attacking strategies for the setter to set up the attackers so that when they do receive the ball, they're in the best position in order to score when they put the ball back over to the opponent's side. And in this situation, in options 1 and options 2, what the setter needs to be aware of is who they are in between so they don't cross either left or right. So for example, with player 1 and 6, player 1 cannot start on the left side of player 6, and it cannot start on the side of the right of player 2. So that's why player 1 needs to always be in the middle of 6 and 2 in this position. And then again, once the ball is back over to the opponent's side, you return to base, and now it's 1, 2, and 6 in the front, and 4, 5, and 3 in the back. I hope this is getting a little easier to understand, as well as the regulations of who not to cross vertically. That means left or right, and who not to cross horizontally, which means front or back. So let's move on to our final position 6, and here is where our setter is in right front. This is probably one of the setter's favorite position, because when they are receiving the ball, the spot that they're supposed to receive it is right where they are, so they don't have to move as much. And then again, in this situation, our front row players are 1, 6, and 5, and our back row players are 2, 3, and 4. And again, with our setter being in position, or in the right front position, it cannot cross player 6 on the left-hand side, so it needs to always be on the right. And then again, when the ball's put back over to the net, you return back to base, and now it's 1, 5, and 6. Okay, and then from there, we're back to position, or rotation number 1, and it starts all over again with the same options as that you have for 1 and 2. I hope that wasn't too hard to understand. I know it's a little difficult and a lot easier when you can visually be there. However, I do have an assignment for you folks. What I want you to do is Google different serve-receive videos on YouTube. And first thing that I want you to do is identify who their setter is, because once you're able to identify the setter, you're able to identify what positions they are in when they're receiving the ball. And then the second thing that I want you to do is I want you to actually, kind of identify them. See if the options 1 and 2 are a part of their setup when they are in serve receive. Okay, and then once you do that, what I want you guys to know is how you did. Were you able to identify the different serve receive positions or rotations that they were in? If you were, then good job to you folks. If not, just go back over this video, or maybe you can either Google other videos, maybe they might help you a little better, or on Friday, what I'm going to be doing is setting up a Zoom call. And if you guys have any questions, I want you folks to come in there so I can explain it to you folks in a little bit greater detail and have you guys face to face with me, which makes it a lot easier. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'd love any feedback that you guys have, so feel free to give that. And I'll see you folks on Friday.